Hey, first graders, it's Mr. Becken here. I'm here to read another story to you today. So, today we're reading the story Paul Bunyan, and you can find it within Epic, within the Houghton Mifflin, the HM Unit 7 collection within your mailbox. So, today, this morning, I want you just to listen to me read it, and then if you need to, you can go back in Epic on your own and listen and read the story on your own as well. So we have three vocabulary words that we're going to be looking at as we read the story. The first one I'm actually going to do is believable. Can you say believable? Believable. So believable, um, we look at the first part of the word and it says believe. So with that, um, we have our root word. And then able means that you can do it. So you can believe in something, is what believable means. All right. Our next word that we're going to be using in this story and finding and learning about is unbelievable. Can you say unbelievable? Unbelievable. So un is a prefix that actually means not. So if we know that this is believable right here, so believable means that you can believe it. It's something that you can believe. If un means not, unbelievable means not something you can believe. So you can't believe it. All right? So if we find the word unbelievable in our story today, just know that that means you cannot believe it. And then our last vocabulary word is exaggerated. So, exaggerated is a word that means something that you're kind of making into a story that's not completely true. You're making it seem like it's more than it actually is, right? Um, so, you're exaggerating, you're making it seem so much worse or so much better than it actually was. So, like, you might go fishing and you might catch a fish that's actually this big, but you might tell a friend that you caught a fish this big, right? So you're exaggerated the size of the fish. So there are our three words. Again, we have exaggerated, believable, and unbelievable. All right. So I'm going to be reading you the story, Paul Bunyan, and then afterward, you're going to be answering this question. So just kind of let you know ahead of time. Why would Paul Bunyan be helpful to have around? Or why wouldn't he be helpful? So maybe you could even answer both of them. You could say, why would he be helpful? And then you could also give reasons for why wouldn't he be helpful to have around. All right. All right, here we go. So again, I'll show you quickly how to get there if you're going to read it on your own. Otherwise, you can follow along with me. So you go into Epic, you go to your mailbox, and then you go to your collection HM Unit 7. And then we are going to scroll down. It's for me on my computer, it's on the second line. For you, it probably will be on the third line. But it's the story that looks like this. He's carrying an axe. We have Paul Bunyan. All right, so here we go. Paul Bunyan. It's an American tall tale. All right. And it's retold by M.J. York and illustrated by Michael Garland. I'm going to blow this up so it's a little bigger for you. All right, here we go. So here's Paul Bunyan right here. Way back in the olden days when the big woods stretched clear across America from coast to coast, a bouncing baby boy was born in Maine. This baby was called Paul Bunyan, and he was the mighty big boy. Baby Paul was so big it took 5 storks to bring him when he was born. By the time he was a week old, he was wearing his father's clothes. When he was hungry, He drank all the milk out of 12 cows. When he got the hiccups, everyone ran out of their houses thinking it was an earthquake. When he sneezed, folks had to open their umbrellas all the way in California. So I don't know if you know this, but Maine and California are on completely different sides of the United States. So Paul Bunyan is that big that when he sneezes, people are opening their umbrellas across in a different state, across the United States. When Paul Bunyan grew up, he knew there would only there was only one job for him. Folks were moving west in those days, and they all needed houses. They needed firewood and furniture and all kinds of things made of wood. And Paul Bunyan knew he would be the biggest and best logger in the country. So here you see the picture of actually how tall Paul Bunyan is compared to these trees. He's kind of giant, isn't he? Paul Bunyan Paul Bunyan set up his logging camp on the Onion River. He had so many men in his camp, they worked in three groups. One group was always going to work, one was working, and one was coming back. Paul's voice was so loud all the men had to wear earmuffs so they wouldn't go deaf. It took a lot of food to feed all those men. The cook set up a pancake griddle bigger than a skating rink, and that's how his assistants greased it up, skating round the griddle with bacon strapped to their feet. The cook was nearsighted, though. One day he put blasting powder in the batter instead of baking powder. Those pancakes blew the roof clear off the cookhouse. Paul Bunyan had a mighty big axe. It was so big he could chop down 40 acres of trees with one swing. One day he got tired while he was heading back to camp, so he let his axe drag behind him. The axe opened up a big old crack folks now call the Grand Canyon. So they're saying that him dragging this axe made the Grand Canyon. I don't know if you've ever been to the Grand Canyon and seen how big it is. This kind of makes me think of some of our vocabulary words, right? Whether is this exaggerated? Are they telling a story that's bigger than it actually was? Or maybe is this believable? Do you believe what you're hearing right now? If you don't believe, you might say it's unbelievable. But if you do believe, you might say, ooh, that's believable. Right? So those are our vocabulary words to continue to think about as we're reading the story. Now the winter of 47 was colder than the coldest winter the old gray beards could remember. It was so cold that words froze in the air as you said them. Then there was a huge chatter in the spring when they all thawed at the same time. It was so cold, even the snow turned blue. But the snow and the cold didn't bother Paul Bunyan. Why not? Because when Paul Bunyan walked, the snowbanks were so afraid of getting stepped on, they moved clear out of his way. So Paul Bunyan was walking out in the woods during the winter of the blue snow. The snowbanks moved away, and under the biggest snowbank was a big blue baby ox. The ox was born white, but he turned blue on account of the snow. So because of the snow moving over, the ox ended up turning blue because the snow was blue. Again, is this believable or is it unbelievable? How are you feeling right now as I'm reading this to you? Right? Are they exaggerating the story? Are they making it seem like it's so much bigger and better than it actually was? Paul cradled the ox in his arms and took him home. The ox gave Paul Bunyan's face a big, sticky lick and they became great friends. Paul called the blue ox Babe, and the name stuck even when Babe grew bigger than Paul. Babe was so big it took 47 axe handles to measure between his horns. He was so long, if you or I stood on his tail, we'd need a telescope to see his nose. When Babe wanted a snack, he ate 30 bales of hay in one bite, wire and all. With Babe around, Paul Bunyan could work twice as fast. As quick as Paul cut down a tree, Babe hauled it away. When Paul Bunyan wanted to s- when Paul Bunyan wanted to skin a log, he hitched Babe up to one end and held the bark himself at the other end. Babe would pull the log out clean as a whistle, leaving Paul holding the bark. Around the camp, the men hung up their shirts to dry on Babe's horns. But Babe, but Babe's most important job was making the logging roads straight by pulling out their twists and turns. One time, Paul Bunyan and Babe went out to the Dakotas to do some logging. They worked so fast and so hard they cut down all the trees there. But since they were headed home again, they decided to clean up before they left. Paul Bunyan pounded all the tree stumps down into the ground, and that's why to this day there are so few trees in the Dakotas. After a while, Babe got sick of hauling logs all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, so Paul Bunyan decided that there should be a channel running all the way from Minnesota to Louisiana. He dug the mighty channel. When the dirt went over his left shoulder, it made the Rocky Mountains. And when the dirt went over his right shoulder, it made the Appalachian Mountains. Babe kicked over his water bucket to fill the channel, and today logs can float from north to south on the Mississippi River. After many years of logging together, Paul and Babe's work was done, so they packed up and moved to Alaska. Listen carefully, and you can probably still hear Paul yelling, Timber! Beyond the story. So this is kind of after the story's done. Paul Bunyan is a type of story known as a tall tale. Tall tales are set in real life places like the American West, but contain fictional and exaggerated elements. There's our word exaggerated. To exaggerate something is to make it larger or more exciting, scarier, or otherwise than it would be in real life. Some tall tales are based on true events or actual people. Others are completely made up or fiction. In the case of Paul Bunyan's story, the main character and his ox are fictional. No history of a real life Paul Bunyan exists. You could call Paul Bunyan larger than life. There are so many exaggerated elements in this tall tale that it's hard to count them all. A few are that Paul Bunyan was so large that he blew birds across the country with his sneeze, that he created the Grand Canyon with his dragging axe, and that he found and raised a baby blue ox that grew up to be as large as he was. What other exaggerations can you find? So those were just some of those things that were kind of larger and more exciting than they actually were supposed to be, right? Paul Bunyan said it was a fictional character, so not real. Despite all of the fiction, the character of Paul Bunyan exists in a land that's very real. He has a job as a logger or a lumberjack. Lumberjacks are often very large men as they have to swing big axes and haul heavy lumber. He travels from Maine to Minnesota to Oregon and back, all real places in the United States. And he chops trees to float down rivers to be made into lumber, wood to build houses and furniture at sawmills just like a real lumberjack would.